Great, thank you, Mike. Actually, I have some friends in the jewelry business. There's a 3D printer called MakerBot that you can buy for $1,800. And you can actually, when you make jewelry out of silver, what you have to do is you have to do something called lost wax, where you make a mold out of wax. Now you can take a CAD file and you can actually print that and you can make it. So you could have a customer walk into the store, say this is what they want, sit beside them on the CAD CAM machine, say, do you like this, you like this? Print the mold, cast the silver, and you make the jewelry instantly. And that's with an $1,800 machine. So the stuff that Mike is talking about.
You're right. I got an email just 2 days ago from a person Bob McKee. He said, I want to know about making jewelry with this 3D printing stuff. And so I sent him a couple of links where metals are now being actually printed, like you say.
Well, that's the next generation, is actually not even making the wax and casting it.
That's correct.
They actually have a high heat element in it, and it actually fuses the metal, and it prints with a metal powder.
Yes.
So it's actually making parts. They're making engine parts like that.
Looks like inkjet, but it's not the same as inkjet.
Great.
So. Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
And we're going to save questions. We're going to have a panel up here where you're going to have a chance to ask Mike some questions. So I would like to bring up, who am I bringing up? Janie, come on up. Where is she? Janie is going to talk to us about Knickerbox to Victoria's Secret. And she is a famous designer, fashionista, underwear specialist, which is pretty amazing. So take it away.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, everybody? Yeah. Okay. So I guess that branding. Oh, okay. I'll stay behind. No. I'll stay behind. Oh, look, it's now being brought down to my height. How deeply depressing. Okay. Jonas, I just can't compete. Is that really good? Yes. Okay. I'm praying I've got the right presentation on here, Jonas. You brought up, that's it. That's it. Perfect, thank you. So I guess brands and retail have been part of my life ever since I can remember. My father was a retailer, albeit on the financial, which is, as I've discovered over the years, the popular side of retailing, more than the creative side, which tends to be the slightly more unpopular, the more corporate you become in the industry. So retailing was definitely something that I probably was destined to go into. And I, first of all, had kind of real aspirations to be a fashion designer. And I went to the London School of Fashion, and very quickly, as I kind of was around the time of John Galliano, Rifat Ozbek, I knew that I lacked a fundamental piece of the puzzle, and that, frankly, was talent. And I thought to myself, you know, I am flogging a dead horse here. It is absolutely pointless. And I kind of knew, thanks to my father, which I could have well done without, I had this deeply logical, commercial mind that was never going to make me the next fabulous thing in fashion. So I changed tack rather dramatically, and I decided to become a trainee buyer at the wonderful Marks & Spencer. And I went there when I was 21 years old. But I think by that stage, having had my father throw me in a factory in Brick Lane and taught me how to sew up paper bags and all that type of thing, that I already had the entrepreneurial spirit kind of lurking somewhere. And so the big corporate world of Marks & Spencer became sort of a curiosity project for me more than anything else. And if you could sort of picture, I know that sort of after the fantastic talk on technology and everything else, I'm taking you back to Dickensian retail at this point. But if you remember kind of the 80s, it was a time where speciality retailing was coming through. And we had already seen the Sock Shop and Sophie Merman, who had become kind of the darling of the speciality retail world. Roy Bishko at Tyrac, and small retail space had become incredibly important and extremely popular. And I had found myself at Marks and Spencer in the casual blouse department. And to this day, I am still not sure what a casual blouse is, other than the fact that apparently it didn't have a welt or a placket. That was the only description they gave us. And it made me start to kind of focus attention on other areas of the business that perhaps I could get into. And I started to focus my attention towards, oh, I'm sorry, I just pressed the wrong button, towards lingerie. I had noticed that every surplus fabric that came into the business that didn't work was sent straight over to the knicker department. Make it into knickers, it'll be fine. Just make it into knickers, and we'll put them on those Luton gondolas in an extremely unattractive fashion, and they'll just sell. Underwear was an absolute commodity product, and Marks and Spencer were holding 40% of the British marketplace with absolutely no competition whatsoever. There was a little bit of Janet Rager going on at the top end. There were a few market stalls going on at the bottom end. But largely, Marks and Spencer was sitting with this colossal 40% of the market. The opportunity in the UK at the time, and I can't tell you how difficult without the internet it was to find out this information, by the way, was £2 billion a year. That was opposed to the tie market, which was 100 million, and the sock market that was 300 million. So suddenly it started looking like a raging opportunity. And as we had Margaret Thatcher in power, who was kind of sending us all there, she didn't do much for sustainability, that was for sure, sending us all out there to kind of get into debt and, you know, go and get a 95% mortgage and you can all be a yuppie and everybody can be successful. I kind of jumped on the bandwagon and with the worst business plan in the history of the planet, went off to 4 banks and managed to raise £75,000. And as part of my research, and I just want you to picture how sophisticated it was, I sat outside Sock Shop in a cafe opposite for a full day and counted everybody that went to the till point, based it all on a £5 average spend, and that became the business plan. Times it by 365 days a year. It was deeply sophisticated stuff. But so willing were they in the UK to lend you money that out I went and I started the business. I had by that stage met a merchandiser at Marks and Spencer, and we were now plotting. And we both left, and we came up with the name very, very quickly and very, very easily. And in October of 1986, the first Knickerbox store opened. The philosophy was relatively simple, largely because I was able to pick up on the great philosophy of Marks and Spencer in the early 80s. And I'm sure anybody that was involved there at the time will remember that it was all about British manufacturing, 80% British manufacturing, as I remember, great quality product, never going to be the cheapest, but will last you a lifetime, a great place to work, as my parents seriously reminded me as I walked out of there to start up my own business. They were furious. But it was a very simple philosophy for us because we wanted to take on board all of that, but then just start to kind of present lingerie in a new fashion. And I guess that was innovation in the early 80s. Nobody had an underwear shop on the high street. And actually convincing the landlords was not an easy task because, you know, they were, oh my God, it's going to be sex shops all over the high street, it's going to be a disaster. And we really had to convince them that this was a very wholesome concept, and it was really a way of people being able to buy fashionable underwear, and with the same promise that Marks and Spencer gave, under our own label, beautiful quality, and at the Marks and Spencer prices, which meant one thing, and that was that I had to go to Marks and Spencer suppliers and persuade them. I tell you, Nathan, if you're in this room, you are so lucky I didn't know you then, because I went in and said, you know, and this was to suppliers in the UK that were producing 22,000 dozen a week for Marks and Spencer, and saying, I need 3 dozen. And even then I'd put the quantities up because I was too embarrassed to say what I really needed. I need 3 dozen, and I need it in 3 colours, and I need it in 4 sizes. And I think probably just to irritate M&S, they were prepared to do it. And so we really did kind of make a great start. And And I think this newspaper article from those sort of very early days, colossally bad picture, talking about the risks and rewards really summed it up. And actually, I know I've got a pile of books there that I'm just leaving here because I've been an avid reader and an avid studier of the creative process. But this book, Growing a Business, and anyone from England, I can tell you it is about as difficult to get hold of as J.R. Hartley's book on fly fishing at this stage of the game. It's such an old book by Paul Hawken. But it is probably the best book. I had to actually do a book review for this book when I was, you know, I just started Knickerbox. I was 24 years old. And the beauty of being an entrepreneur at that age is you get asked to do all sorts of things, judge competitions, I think at one point I was the underwear expert on This Morning television. That was a real coup. But there are tremendous, tremendous rewards to starting your own business. And I think that what this book did was offer fantastic advice, and I remember reading it then, and funnily enough, I read it again before I came out here, and it's almost like, it could almost be my life story, you know, the fact that things don't always go smoothly, never bet the ranch, but there is no such thing as a failed entrepreneur. You always know you can go back, you can always do other things, people will always admire you for going out and trying it yourself. And so my advice, especially, you know, when I go to schools or I go to colleges, is the fact that if you're passionate about something, never be afraid to go and have a go, because the rewards can be fantastic. And not from a monetary perspective so much, but just the enriching experience that you get by having to get involved in every aspect of business. And that stands you in great stead. And you don't realize how great it was until you go somewhere like a Victoria's Secret, and suddenly you realize that you have a very broad spectrum in terms of the experience that you have. Now, this I just put in as a little bit of self-humiliation, just because there's always a huge worry that you get a little bit too big for your boots when you start your own thing. And I just came across this as I was going through some old bits that my parents had kept hold of, and it is so embarrassing. But I thought I'd share it just to just remind myself of the very bad bits. But this was an article that went into Cosmopolitan magazine, and they said, you know what, Janie, we were thinking, if you could turn up to do this article, and I'd never done a newspaper article before, or a magazine article, we've got 6 women, all in business, and they're all going to be doing something related to their business, and we thought you could turn up in your underwear. And of course, stupidly, I turned up with my thermals, and then when the article came out, everybody else was in their business suit. So I looked an absolute idiot, so it's just there to remind me. Then we come on to really what became my absolute passion. And my absolute passion has been storytelling, and the importance of storytelling in business today and in brands today. And I truly don't believe that you can be a relevant and successful brand if you do not have a compelling story. And it is so important that you have somebody in an organization that is constantly going back, looking at the heritage and reminding you of the philosophies and the ethos that brought you to where you are. And this was probably my first move into storytelling. More by luck than anything else, we had probably become such a well-known brand. I think by this stage we probably had about 100 stores, albeit. But at this stage, you know, it was extraordinary that the press had picked up on the fact that here were 2 young people. They had defected, I think was the word they used, from Marks and Spencer. There was this fantastic David and Goliath type story, and the British public kind of got behind it. And, you know, at those early stages, I had no idea that that was truly a branding story. But, you know, it really was. And I think that for any brand to really look at what it is that stops you being a shop and stops you being a commodity or stops you being a website and turns you into something that emotionally connects to the customer is absolutely imperative. This was a shoot that I did in the late 80s, and you know, the funny thing is it kind of looks as relevant today as it did then. This was a girl called Laura Bailey, who was a very well-known model who kind of became a personality. But it just always gave the newspapers something to write about. And of course, you know, the champions of that later were Victoria's Secrets. But this was very much the early stages of storytelling. And just to go on with the reading, and books that have been phenomenally inspiring to me are these two books, Lead with a Story and Storytelling in Business. And they both really try to intellectually put into words how important the telling the story piece is. And not only is it important for brands, but even from a personal perspective. I mean, we used to do exercises whereby we would sit and come up with our own personal branding. You know, what books do you read? What TV shows? What are your aspirations? You know, where do you holiday? And very quickly you can pick up a whole picture of yourself, and it actually gives you a very clear vision for the future. So those are just two books from there. So we now move to 1995. We had 200 stores at this stage, and they were all over the world. And I think this is a very interesting part for any entrepreneurial business, whereby you've gone from being the small, cute, very easy to manage. I remember the manufacturers from M&S used to turn up with 20 meters of fabric, and they'd say to me, I've got 20 meter sample length, Janie. Do you want bulk or do you want a sample? I go, oh no, let's just go for bulk. And we used to just like run it through the factory. So we had got to that stage where it had been such fun, but now it was getting quite a serious deal. It was, I think we were at about a 30 million turnover. It was very profitable. It had ridden the 1991 recession very well. But in the meantime, I had had top left-hand corner triplet daughters, which definitely added to the pressure of what was now a very rapidly growing business, and a business that had 6 stores in Japan, and a team of 35 people in Japan to run the 6 shops in Japan. Their people, not my people. So the pressures were immense, and we decided at that point that it was time to sell the business. And also the fact that I think at that stage, and I think every entrepreneur has to look at that stage of their business and say, now is probably the time to bring in somebody that can take it on to its next stage. Doesn't always happen like that, because very often when an entrepreneur leaves, it kind of loses its soul. And in Knickerboxer's case, after we sold it, it did lose its soul. And eventually in 2000, it was sold to Ann Summers. Would not have been my choice, I must be honest. Chad knows this. But equally, she's definitely tried to keep the brand essence as it was, and we've talked since about that. But I have to say that I wasn't even tinged with sadness, because it was an amazing experience. It was an amazing brand that people still feel very good about. It was something that I truly think changed the face of lingerie retailing in the UK. Marks and Spencer, despite how small we were, definitely got their act together and definitely changed the way that they produced underwear and definitely turned it into lingerie. And so there were some fundamental changes that happened. For the next few years, I spent some time doing some consultancy work. So I built brands for people in the high street, studied their brands, really went in there and named them and looked at the detail, bags, lots of tissue paper, really trying to sort of buy in and give them a new category to work in. So this was something that I did for Oasis, a brand that I called Odile, which in Swan Lake is one of the 2 girls that's the bad one. But it was a very, very successful, actually, and a very cute brand. I also did some things for Karen Millen. And then in 2007, I got I think a cold call from Victoria's Secret, and it was a really funny one for me, because I had studied Victoria's Secret my whole career and had never really considered, obviously geographically, that I would ever work for them. But there was nothing I didn't know about them. I had watched and followed them my whole career. I knew everything about Les Wexner. I knew everything about the Limited. I knew the way they traveled. I knew what car service they used. I mean, I was a true stalker. I was a true stalker. So in awe of the Victoria's Secret brand I was, that I knew everything. And in fact, in my Knickerbox days, I used to go out to factories and say, any screens that Victoria's Secrets haven't used that I might be able to pick up on? So I kind of had known the whole thing. And in fact, very early on, in fact, probably before Les Wexner even bought Victoria's Secrets. I went out to San Francisco to see the very first store. And the funny thing about that story was I remember coming out of Victoria's Secrets, which definitely had a magical name, and it definitely, for whatever reason, had this emotional connection to the customer. As I sat down afterwards to kind of think about what I'd seen, and it was very Victoriana, it kind of wasn't what I'd been expecting, I found myself sitting in this unusual shop, having a cup of coffee and sitting on a coffee sack. And Stephen was with me, and I went up and I kind of ordered a cappuccino, which I kind of had never done in that country before, in America before. And I sat down and I said to him, "This is really cool." I said, "Do you think perhaps we should be going into coffee shops instead of underwear?" And of course it was the first Starbucks. So, equally, very often, especially friends that went out from Europe would say, "You know, I love Victoria's Secrets, I love the idea." But when they went to the stores and the product didn't quite match the perception of what they thought the brand was. And that felt like it was the opportunity there. And I was trying to describe to the HR guy what I was thinking about the brand. So I decided to tell him a story. And I said to him, "You know, if you imagine Victoria as this beautiful, glamorous woman who went out and conquered the world, she lives on Broadway in Herald Square in this 10,000 square foot beautiful store stroke apartment." And I said, and now she's at the stage where she has children. I said she has a child called Pink, who quite frankly is by far the favourite child, getting a little bit too big for her boots, taking over way too much space in the bedroom, and is almost at a stage where she needs to go and get her own apartment. I said you have Body by Victoria, which is quite frankly the frumpy child, who is always at the back, looking a bit sad and a bit miserable. And then you have Sexy Little Things, who quite frankly needs a curfew and needs to be kept at home because it's really not good. And then there's Angel, who is a flighty child with absolutely no focus and definitely needs to be given a direction. And then lastly, there's Intimissimi. And I said, and Intimissimi feels like it's the sleepover that needs to go home. I said, so that was kind of my introduction to Victoria's Secrets. And they kind of looked at me completely blankly. But it ended up being a 5-year joy for me. I absolutely loved my time, even though I commuted to the point where I swear this is the first time I've actually seen the beauty of Sri Lanka. Usually I'm looking at it through such jet-lagged haze that I've just never noticed anything other than the factory, the office, the factory, the flight. And this time it has been a complete joy, and I can't wait to come back and spend more time. But Victoria's Secrets was a really interesting 5 years. It was really interesting because it goes back to the whole storytelling piece. Victoria's Secrets had a story to tell, and the story needed to be focused, and it needed for everybody to understand it. And, you know, we went a long way. Chad knows more than this, that I could talk for England, just trying to convince everybody that Victoria existed, and she travelled around the world until I got everyone believing it, because it was the belief in the brand and the rebooting of the creative process, and also the creative being strongly in parallel with the strong financial of a $7 billion turnover business that I think starts to give it the yin and yang. And somebody else that I think has done this in a sensational fashion and different, because they have Angela Arendts and Christopher Bailey as Burberry. I mean, Burberry, and I think pretty much everyone will remember, had licensed themselves to the point where the brand was becoming irrelevant, and even worse, the brand had degraded sufficiently that it was almost mocked in terms of, you know, the check and everything else. They have done a sensational job in bringing that back. They've done a sensational job, not just from the financial perspective and the store fit, as we saw earlier in the video, but also retelling the story of Burberry, talking about the heritage of Burberry, the fact that you go through the stores and they talk about the craftsmanship, and the fact that they made it quintessentially British again, and the people that they use on their shoots are interesting British people, and they don't deviate from the story, and it has made it more and more powerful. And the fact that Christopher Bailey and Angela Arendt are both almost as powerful as each other means there is a fantastic yin and yang between the creative and between the financials. And what that means is that when they look at technology, when they look at innovation, they look at it through the customer's eyes, they look at it through creative eyes, not just from a financial standpoint. And for me, that is the future of business. And it's called, if I've got it, I bet you I'm going to go to a slide that, okay, I'm just going to talk about two other things. One, the Kardashians, 65 million a year they all earned last year. Obtainable branding, you know, we know everything about them, who'd want to do it, but they're out there, they could sell anything to a specific, and I'll tell you, it's all over Sri Lankan TV, so it's not even that we can go the American route here. But, and also Victoria Beckham, really worth talking about, because this is a woman that started her fashion label, you know, Spice Girls, footballer's wife, but now highly credible in the fashion world. And she is in a situation now where I think she's just posted figures of 1.5 million profit on a 15 million turnover from 2011 to 2012. It's really phenomenal. So just to show how easily with Brand Beckham, the family, the footballer, she's told the story, she's built the brand, now she can absolutely exploit it in a very credible fashion. And the last one, Jennifer Aniston, when we used to do any form of research in the state, Jennifer Aniston came out on top from every single perspective. Again, it's obtainable fashion. People get her, she's not too pretty, she's one of those girls, she works hard, and everyone thinks, if I worked as hard as her, I reckon I could look like that. And so that's kind of what makes her as powerful as she is. And from a Victoria's Secret standpoint, I mention this only because they do not buy into the celebrity culture. What they do is make their own celebrities. They start as models, and then they turn into businesswomen. There's Tyra Banks and Heidi Klum. So what do these changes mean in the bigger picture? And I know I'm nearly out of time, so I'm going to just really rattle through. Well, it's called The Rise of the Creative Class, another great book. If anybody, and what it talks about is the importance of creativity go forward. And, you know, if you look at the Fortune 500, look at any big business, what you'll find is that there are very few creative people sitting at the top of the pile. That has to change. And what this tries to do is intellectualize that and give hard figures to what a creative input, a powerful creative input can bring to a business. So definitely a book worth getting. Just to highlight the point, Christopher Kane, people like PPR, LMVH, Caring are going in there, picking up creative talent early, and then commercializing and pushing them out over a number of brands, J.W. Anderson. So just a quick reminder of who tell their story well, who are consistent, and who stay with it. Starbucks. We know the story, we know it's consistent, we know what we're going to get. They probably need to innovate a bit, but nevertheless, right now, they just sustain very well. Pret a Manger, we all know the philosophy, a very strong story. It's made fresh today, they're very philanthropic. Apple is, you know, we know it, and Burberry we've already spoken about. HMV, Nokia, and BlackBerry. All of them sat on their laurels. All of them allowed other people to come along. HMV didn't think that iTunes and digital music was really going to be that big a thing, and they were wrong. Nokia, the same. They just did not get onto smartphones, and BlackBerry, first with email technology, just didn't move forward quick enough. So lastly, just the brand essence model, and I'm not even going to go any further with this, but just the things that I personally always look at, and I think everybody should look at within their brand. Your secret formula, your ethos, your philosophies, your sustainability, all of that good stuff. Your environment, your customer loyalty. And one of the things that I learned hugely at Victoria's Secret is always know what you're best at, always know what your core business is, and stay focused. And that's it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Stay up there. So Janie, stay up there. If you want to take a seat over here,
Yeah.
that'd be fantastic. Mike, come on up and take a seat. And we have 3 additional guests. Ashraf Sattar, the chairman of Timex Group. Are you here, Ashraf? Come on up, take a seat. Nathan, forgive me, Sivaganathan. Is that even close? Sorry, he's the chief growth officer of MAS Holdings. Come on up. And Gihan, and I'm not even going to try, chairman of Orient Design. You here? Come on up. Fantastic. And we're going to talk about technology, innovation, design. Janie, great presentation. Mike and Janie, you've already kind of introduced yourself and told your story, so why don't we start here? And if you guys could kind of tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do and who you're doing it for, that'd be fantastic. You can make a, you got elected to go first. Hello, hello, hello. No, that's not working. It's working? Great. Go for it.
Hi. I represent Orient Design, which is, I think, the only standalone design.
That one's working? Yeah.
Hi again. I represent Orient Design, which is, I think, the only standalone design company in Sri Lanka. We have about 70 people working in our company, and we develop product for our customers and for our partners in manufacturing.
Great.
Hi, I'm Ashraf. I'm from Timex Group. I'd like to first thank Jamie and Mike for such an inspirational talk today. I wish Jamie, I get some information from Jamie as well. We as a group are going into retailing now. We have 15 shops, stores around India, 10 shops, and Sri Lanka 5 shops. We think that we can grow this business into a great business, about 200 shops, time to come. We design, we innovate, we create styles. It's a lifestyle store. It's called High Street Sensuality. The name of the store is Avirate. Jamie, if you ever will have time, please go and see the stores. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nathan. I represent MAS Holdings. We employ 66,000 people in 9 countries, and my role is as Chief Growth Officer looking at innovation.
Well, here, keep that up here so we can, and I want to start, Janie, with you. You almost made it sound like it was accidental in the beginning. And then you talked about later on about how much you studied and how hard it was and how hard you